and welcome to More Conversations. Today I'm speaking with Bill Richard, one of our 2022 North San Diego County Board of Directors. Welcome, Bill.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Recently we had a conversation. You had some great tips, some great do's and don'ts.
Sure.
One of them that I thought was fantastic and yet so simple was always call before you arrive at any of your showings. And
Well, it's a little embarrassing, but I learned this the hard way, is that my clients told me they're going to be out of town. And so I brought over some prospective buyers. The house looked normal, came into the house, normally knock, do the phone, you do the ring the bell, and you yell upstairs, you try to get anybody's attention, and then you come in and you walk around. Until we get up to the primary suite, we open up the door, and thank God they were sleeping only. But they were in there, and so I learned from that moment on to call and call again just to make sure. And that was just one thing.
Yeah, that's a great tip. That's a lesson learned.
Yeah, it was
right?
a lesson.
And I think the next two statements go hand in hand. And not only why is it so important to call, but never assume anything.
Well, I think you never assume that your client, you think you're going to have an appointment, a listing appointment. It's going to be at 11 o'clock. I always call beforehand. Something can come up. I would assume that I'm going to get the listing appointment. But sometimes they'll sit there and say to you, oh, you know what, we already went with someone else, and you're thinking you're the only person in the world, but you're not always. So I don't like to assume. I like to make sure I have the appointment, make sure I'm there on time, and make sure I'm there for the person.
You're a new agent.
Yeah.
You get a lead. You're really excited to start showing properties to your potential clients. What are your top priorities?
Well, top is to make sure that one, that we really know each other a little bit, because I got to get in their head what they're wanting. Working with buyers to me is my favorite thing, because I like to get in their heads. And making sure that they're pre-approved, talking to their lender, not just them. They all have well intentions, but the old saying, buyers are liars. Sometimes they just, we all look for things we can't afford. We go to cars, we sit in cars we can't afford. Look at watches we can't afford. It's just the nature of people. Well, I want to work with a buyer who actually can afford it. And then you find out, do they want a two-story, single-story? You ask a lot of questions.
So we talk about the 3 Ps. And what are those 3 Ps?
Pre-approval, proof of funds, and no preconceived ideas. And what I mean by that on the pre-approval and the proof of funds is you need to know what you're working with. They mean well, but they don't always have those things or understand them. They may think, oh, I have the funds because my parents are going to help me. Well, that's not a proof of fund. That's a proof of conception or idea, but they haven't really figured that out yet. And so you have to work them through that. The other thing is when they're working with you, you get in their heads that they have this preconceived idea that it's going to be the same house you like. I remember my first house going out with someone. This is it wasn't my first, but in 2000, we went to a home and had shag carpeting, had these avocado, horrible refrigerators and all this. And they walked through the house and I'm like, oh my goodness. And the reality was, we got done. I'm looking at, what do you think? I was going to say something. Thank God I didn't. They loved the place. They thought it was great with their beanbag chairs and they could ohm and all this other stuff. And they're paying for it. So getting in their head to know what they really want is really important.
Yep. And another thing you brought up was working with the decision maker.
Yeah, well, and sometimes it's the husband, the wife, or the significant spouse, the other, or it could be the parents. You don't always know who it is, especially on first-time buyers. And then sometimes later, it could be you think you're working with a couple who are going to buy something, but they're going to be going through a divorce, and they haven't told you that, yes. Or they're working with their parents, and their parents are really the ones who are going to pay for it. So they'll go look, but the parents are going to be the one who are actually buying it, because if the kids can't afford it, they're going to want to be the ones taking over the mortgage.
Right. And then you work with within your own company, within your own life, MultiGenerations, right?
Oh, yeah. My mother's a realtor. Well, was. She passed away last year. She was 95. She was an icon in the industry. My brother Bob, my son's a realtor. So working with MultiGenerations, it's interesting because I often tell people I want to treat everybody exactly the same, but I do know that if they're younger, sometimes they want to do text messages. But I will always respect anyone and call them and talk to them. They won't always act that way with me, and I have to know their language and what they're going to do. So I don't want to judge them, but sometimes it's just the way that they are. That they're fixated in this. If they're older, I'm going to get together with them personally and talk to them because I know that they want to have face-to-face. And I will always call them. They don't really like the text. If they're in the between 40 to 60, then I'm going to realize they like text and they also like to talk sometimes. If they're younger than that, they're going to want text, emails, very little conversation. It's just the generations, and they're no different or worse. You just need to know how to communicate with them.
So let's talk about open houses and what are the values or maybe the not values of having open houses, past, present, future?
Sure. When I started, I did my first year, I didn't know what to do, but I ended up doing 92 open houses. I was blessed to have a lot of open houses to do. Can't find those now. And I ended up doing 51 transactions from them because I had a different way of doing it, always giving something of value to anyone that would come. I find there's nothing better for you. You're sitting in an office. No one's going to walk into your office looking for real estate. But if you have your sign up and they say, I see your sign everywhere, they're coming to you. What great publicity is that? Now, you're sitting in an open house. You got to give them something of value. You also should think about all the other things that come into that open house, knowing the stats, knowing that probably 65% of the people who come won't be able to, or are not going to be able to afford it. There's going to be maybe only 3% out of 100. So 3 out of 100 people that'll actually be able to afford that open house. That's the normal stats. Today, you could get a lineup of 300 people coming to your open house. The majority of those are going to be looky-loos. Out of those, you'll probably have 15 multiple bids, and it is crazy right now. So open houses are good to generate business, to show that you're out in the neighborhood. So you're actually fishing for a lot of people. If you're an agent, you want to get business, you're fishing for the ones who can't afford it. So always have less in your inventory. The fishing for the ones who can afford it. And also the neighbors seeing you doing the open houses, because if you're good at it, they're going to want you to sell their open houses too. So there's a lot of things to be said about them. And there's a lot of techniques, but most of them is just have something of value to them. And what I mean by something of value, know the house, know the inventory, go to the marketing sessions, go listen for what's going on. Go out and see the inventory so you can describe it to someone. They may not like yours because it has a pool and they have kids they don't want the pool. But what about the one 3 doors down? So there's just so much that you can get. It's a business unto its own, just doing open houses. Abide by the sign laws of the community. Do the things that are necessary. But you can really do a lot if you do them right.
Well, I want to thank you for spending time with me. I think you offered a lot of valuable tips of some do's and don'ts.
Yeah, there you go.
And I look forward to us speaking again soon.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.